Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. It's been a hot minute, and by that I mean it's been about a week and a day, whatever. Basically, if you didn't see, I was like, okay, slower uploads until the new update comes out, but I knew I wanted to come back like this week because this week probably will have the test realm, so I will obviously go over that when it comes out, but as of now, I'm just recording this video. I was actually going to come back yesterday, exactly a week after I had uploaded my last video, but then I got like sick yesterday and I didn't feel like recording, so here I am now. Whatever, I'm back. I hope you all are, having a good time. I still uploaded some Valorant clips on my second channel if you didn't see that. The second channel is obviously in my channels tab, and on my community tab I linked some of the videos. Just some fun little videos that you can go watch if you want to see what I get up to when I'm not playing Wizard101, which is the majority of the time. But enough of that out of the way. Let's actually get into the video. Now, today I wanted to talk about something that I think is very important that I've talked about in the past, but I wasn't nearly as eloquent with speaking back then, and I also didn't edit my videos, so it got pretty confusing, and I tend to drag out topics and not make them as concise as possible. Today, I want to talk about Dragoon gear. I want to talk about the balancing of Dragoon gear, and I want to talk about how Dragoon gear, in my opinion, ruined the balancing of Wizard101 in many, many ways. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, first off, let's give some context for Dragoon gear, because this is actually very much needed for what I'm going over today. So, some context for Dragoon gear. Dragoon gear was the first decent upgrade that was released to any gear set in 30 levels. Now, if you don't know, for a long time, from about, I think it was 2013, 2014 onwards, Malastair gear was the best gear. At level 100, you got full Darkmoor gear, and that was the best gear. And this continued on for actually quite a few years afterwards. Even in 2017, 2018, when Mirage came out, the best gear was still Malastair gear. And obviously there was some new gears coming out like Cabal gear, stuff like that, stuff that were kind of upgrades, but there wasn't anything definitive like this is the next step until Dragoon gear came out. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is Dragoon gear had to be a big upgrade. KingsIsle knew that they needed to incorporate something new, something big to make people want to farm for a set of gear, because we haven't farmed for a set of gear in a very long time. Again, most people were still using Malastair gear. Now that's the kind of major context for what this video is and what you need to know. The important thing to note here is that Dragoon gear needed to be a massive upgrade and needed to actually improve on Malastair gear, and to do this they incorporated the use of gear sets. So level 130 rolls around and KingsIsle's like, okay, we need a new set of gear, and to do this we'll make a new dungeon as well to go along with it and make kind of this interesting little new area. And with that came the Catacombs. Now the Catacombs was a major kind of area that had a lot of side fights but had some main fights that were incorporated into a main quest line. The most important thing here is that the Catacombs is challenging. The Catacombs is a significant step up from almost anything we've seen in Wizard101 in the past. And this was definitely true because compared to that, Imperia had just come out. Imperia had some challenging things, that had some challenging fights, but beyond the Trident and maybe Medulla, the average boss health was not even 20,000. It was somewhere in the 15,000s. So KingsIsle was like, we need a new challenge to go along with this Dragoon gear, and them creating that came out with the Catacombs. A lot of these bosses have 40,000 plus health. A lot of them, like a vast majority. I don't think there's a single one that has under 30,000 health. I could be wrong there, but the gist of it is the Catacombs was difficult and was meant to be difficult. Now, where's the problem with this and what am I getting at here? Because obviously this video is about how Dragoon gear broke balancing. Well, this right here, I will say, is the spark of what made Dragoon gear unbalanced. Now, I'm going to go into how it's unbalanced later on, but the important thing I want to note here, and the reason why I think Dragoon gear ended up being unbalanced as it is the fact that they based Dragoon gear around what you'd expect the difficulty of the Catacombs to be. That means the minimum for most people for this set of gear is 150. 140 to 150 for most schools. Even Ice can get up to 140, 150 extremely easily. And that's what they about expected it to be, with things like Fire and Storm getting up into the 170, 180 range. The reason why this is important and what this is based on is this is based on the idea that bosses will have have maybe semi-difficult cheats with their health being in the 30,000 range. And that's what I think personally Dragoon gear was designed around. Now, generally speaking, why is this a bad idea if you can't connect the dots? The reason why this is bad and why this ended up being a negative thing should be kind of obvious, and that's the fact that they did not keep up with this and they did not genuinely make the game more challenging as a result. They gave everyone this really powerful gear and they didn't up the stakes of the game as a result. As I said, 30,000 health average leads to about 150 damage. Well, if you had to say, what is the average Caramel boss's health? If you had to say, what's the average Lemuria's boss's health? Well, to give you an answer, Caramel is actually not that powerful. Caramel's average is about 10,000, I would say. Even the most difficult, and I say this in quotes, most difficult boss in Caramel, the Aberrant Paradox, only has about 16,000 health. That is not a lot compared to what the Catacombs is. In fact, that's about 50% of what the Catacombs is. Come Lemuria, it's the same thing. If you look at the last fight, each of them only has 10,000 health. Now, obviously, this is to make up for the fact that there's 8 of them, but if you even look at some of the other fights throughout the world, I'd say the most health boss besides that is about 20,000. Now, obviously, I would say Lemuria is a bit better in this case because Lemuria actually had some difficult cheats to balance it out, but for most other things and most things in this game, it was not balanced around that. So based on that, what am I getting at here? The balancing in this game was broken significantly. We felt way too strong and we got way too strong compared to what it should be. If I had to say right now, I'd say the average health of a boss should be about 25,000. And I think that's true for literally every new boss. Every new boss should have in the 20,000s, high 20,000s health. And I know that KingsIsle wants to reduce the health to not make the fights feel tedious, but actually in this case, they're doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Right now, the fights feel too easy. I can't even say when the last time I experienced a genuine challenge in this game was that wasn't something that was easily countered. For example, right? Think of the most challenging bosses in this game and what makes them challenging. For every single one of them, it's because of the cheats. And for every cheat, there is a way to counter that cheat. The Trident fight is not challenging in the slightest as long as you have a Juju spammer and someone who does an overtime. It's just simple. And every single major boss like that is simply that. For the non-major bosses, they're a cakewalk because you can just very easily hit them and kill them. So this right here is what I would say is the first step that ruined the balancing in this game, is we became too powerful, the enemies became weaker. Right now, I would say we are significantly more powerful than what we need to be. Right now, for the health of the enemies they're releasing, we should be at about 130 damage at max, and then Fire and Storm be 140, 150, which is around actually what Malistaire gear was. So kind of just to put it into perspective, in my opinion, that's where we should be. Now that's kind of a wrap up for the Unbalanced in that regard, but I want to talk about something more. I want to talk about actually what inspired me to make this video and the whole reason I want to talk about Dragoon gear being unbalanced. Dragoon gear isn't just unbalanced for the sake of the game. It isn't unbalanced in the sake of us being significantly stronger than the enemy. Obviously, I wanted to make that clear, but I want to go into something else. I think Dragoon gear ruined the balance between schools, and it didn't just ruin it, it destroyed it. Each school in this game has an identity. It has something that makes it unique and something that makes it worth playing. This is true for every single school. I would say obviously there's a few exceptions and every school can fit into every role pretty well, but certain schools are designed for certain things. Ice, throughout this entire game, has had super low damage with very high resist. That's what Ice is. Ice is a tankier school with a lower damage. Similarly, Life is supposed to have less damage and have a higher healing. Balance is supposed to have less damage overall and have other bolstered stats because they're meant for support, blading, and just being generally a balanced school. Death is supposed to be similar and if not a bit less because of their healbacks and their massive effects with healbacks. And finally, Myth, Fire, and Storm are all supposed to have significantly higher damage than every other school. Now I want you to take a second and look at what it actually is. Take a look at what Dragoon gear has done. What is the lowest that an Ice can get while using an offensive Dragoon set? About 140 damage. Similarly, balances have about 150. Deaths have about 150. Same with life. 150 is about the range that they reach. And to put it into perspective, same with myth. And fire and storm can reach a bit higher, 160, 170, but the average for almost every single school, and if you took the average for all 7, is 150, 160 damage. I shouldn't need to tell you why this is kind of bad. It means that every single school in this game, no matter what, as long as you have the Dragoon gear, is perfectly capable of hitting. And I mean this in the most explicit and kind of, I want to hammer this in. Every single school can hit in this game more than sufficiently. And I mean that. This kind of ties back to the earlier topic where I said Dragoon is too strong for the enemies. On top of that, it ruined it because even the weakest Dragoon set, Ice's Dragoon set, is more than capable of being the hitter in any single instance. And I mean this. Every single school can be the hitter. And this was not the case in the past, and I genuinely think KingsIsle made a mistake doing it here. Look at, for example, Ice's Waterworks gear compared to Storm's Waterworks gear. Ice's Waterworks gear only gives about 20 damage overall total, whereas Storm's gives about 60 to 70. And this is true for every school, right? Like some of them give like in the 50 range, whatever. But the point is that certain schools were stronger than others. In this case, that's just not true. Every single school can reach 150 damage. And this brings up another topic, and another thing I want to briefly touch on is this is made even worse by the damage cap. The damage cap makes this even more of a crunch, because if you looked at it without the damage cap, right, like myth can probably get in the 160, 170 range. Ice would still be at the 140 range. Most of the schools would be the 150 range, whereas storm and fire would be up in the 180, 190 range. So it would be kind of similar. But the problem is that with the damage cap, everyone is at about 150, with fire and storm being the exception in the 160, 170 range. So it kind of just hammers in the point where I think realistically the balancing is completely skewed, and it definitely is hurting the game right now. So enough talking about this. I think I've kind of hammered in the point that I want to hammer in. How do you go about fixing this? Because this is a problem, and fixing it is not easy. And let me tell you right now why it's not easy to fix this problem. Nerfs are so much harder to do in a community in a game like this than buffing everything. And you may be like, Noah, that's super weird. That doesn't make sense. You'd think that like nerfing one item wouldn't be that bad compared to buffing everything else, but that's not the case. I want you to imagine right now what would happen if KingsIsle decided to nerf the Dragoon gear to be more balanced. I am willing to bet most of the community would be in outrage. They would be up in arms over this change. And the funny thing is that they would be completely wrong, because it would be good for KingsIsle to do this for their game. They just can't see beyond the fact, oh, I'm losing damage. And I think that's the main issue that I have here, is the fact that right now KingsIsle can't really do anything to fix this beyond simply buffing everything else. So how I personally would fix this would be probably introducing some new gear that kind of shifts the balance around. So like their new 150, 160 gear is going to shift the balance. Don't try to fix the Dragoon gear for what it should be. Try to make the next gear set better, because we're already at the point where we need a new gear set. So I'd say for the next gear set, simply make it so that it kept up with the balance of the past, where every other school besides fire and storm isn't the same. Make it so that there's actually differences between the schools, and then also make it so that the worlds are genuinely harder as a result. I think that would very easily fix the issues and make it so that it's kind of better for the long term of the game, because let's be honest, right now the game is just extremely easy, and directly, in my opinion, that points to the Dragoon gear. I think the Dragoon gear completely ruined balance and made it way too easy. So that's all I really want to talk about today. I kind of wanted to go over an opinion I've had for a long time, and that is just generally the Dragoon gear is unbalanced. I mentioned this before. I mentioned how the Dragoon gear is broken, and a lot of people disagreed with me. A lot of people said, no, Noah, you're dumb. You know, don't nerf the Dragoon gear, whatever. And I think they lack perspective. If you say that right now the Dragoon gear is balanced with how the game should be, you lack perspective, and you definitely aren't seeing the bigger picture right now. This game is easy, lacks no challenge for any school. Ice should not be able to hit as hard as it does in any case. And while some people will disagree with that, I don't know what to say to them. They just want this game to be unbalanced and want to be like, haha, funny number, go burr, right? Like, that's kind of what they want, but that's not what the game should be. But that's really it for today. That's all I wanted to talk about. Let me know your opinions in the comments below. I'm very curious. Do you think that Dragoon gear actually did break the game, or do you completely disagree with me? Do you think I'm just spouting BS, right? Because I am curious. But otherwise, that is it. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.